Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Also, Ole Miss will be available to be listened to on SiriusXM channel 191 at 2:30 on Saturday against Alabama. Alabama will be channel 81, by the way, in that game as well. So if you want a hometown broadcast and you don't get the local stations, check them out there. So I'm here with Jake Thomas, and this is a part of our day of knowing your enemy. We talked to Luke Robinson. Now we're going to talk to Jake Thomas. How you doing, Jake?
I'm doing great, Steve. Thanks for having me on tonight.
Yeah, no problem. Jake is on Tide Talk Live. They do a lot of great stuff. They do biscuits with Bama. They do all kinds of different stuff. Him and his partner, Stacy Blackwell. I think this is
Blackwood.
Blackwood. I couldn't remember the last part of his name. Yeah, it's crazy. That was a brain tumor moment.
No, you good.
So, Jake, whenever we talk about Alabama, and Alabama has had a little bit of issues a quarter through the season, and honestly, this team has not looked like a Nick Saban team. This team has not looked like what we recognize going back to the first year of Saban, although the first year of Saban, they went 6-6. So that's not really fair to say. But this does not look like a Saban team right at the start. And why is that?
That's a good question, Steve. Usually you think a Saban-led team, you think about discipline. And that's something Alabama's not had the past, couple of years. Just mental mistakes, penalties that come out of nowhere, just stupid mistakes like that usually the teams of old didn't have that. Now they do. And I don't know what has happened and what's changed the last couple of seasons, but the mental mistakes and the penalties, that's something you hardly ever saw with an Alabama Nick Saban-led team.
Yeah, and that is a weird situation. And you lead to this weird situation with the quarterbacks. And nobody knows the full story that's been going on. But the rumor is it was Jalen Milroe after Texas, and they started to think about a quarterback change after the Texas game, and maybe Milroe didn't take that well, and he was kind of pseudo suspended. And a whole lot of stuff happened that honestly you just didn't think Alabama did. This was problems that everybody else had, not Alabama.
Yeah, you heard about the players only meeting. We had two last year. We have one already this year. That's something you hardly ever saw or ever heard of. I don't know if it ever happened with previous teams, but it seems like you've never heard about it if it did, because I don't think it really did. But here recently it has, and it's kind of odd because it seems like the players are not on the same, they're not in a cohesive unit together. They're not playing together like teams have of old. So makes you wonder how they're going to look Saturday. Are they going to come out and be the old Alabama where they dominate in the trenches? Or are they going to continue struggling in the trenches like they had the first three games of the season?
Yeah. And what do you think the issue is in the trenches? Their offensive line, honestly, has not been particularly good through the first three games. I think South Florida had 4 or 5 sacks in that game. And granted, it was a weird game, but like I said, we're talking about Alabama not looking like Alabama. And the offensive line, there's been people that complained about Alabama's offensive line play for whatever reasons whenever they were going on this run. But those offensive lines didn't look like this one did. Why is that?
That it's strange, Stephen, because that was one thing that a couple of the offensive linemen talked about through the offseason. Well, how they want to get more physical in the trenches. And right now they haven't. They've been getting whipped on both sides, honestly, in the trenches. And talking about the offensive line, we have a left tackle who's a true freshman, and he's been getting beat a lot. He's young. He's still got to get acclimated to the game speed, but we have not put any help on that side for him. We've not had a tight end to do a chop block or to cut a little bit on the guy he's blocking. It's just nothing. So I wonder, when we're going to adjust to that. You hear a lot about Saban-led teams adjusting the second half. We haven't done it this year, especially when it comes to offensive line and getting help to that young guy at the left tackle.
Weird situation. Alabama, I think, it got 2 really good running backs. They're 5-star true freshmen that came in. But the two players I think that are players, it's Jace McClellan and Roydell Williams, is it not?
Yeah, you're correct. I think Haynes was hurt the first game of the season, so we didn't see him in that game, Middle Tennessee State game. And I'm not sure about Richard Young. I hadn't seen him, since fall camp. I hadn't really heard his name, so I'm not sure what the situation is there.
So let's flip sides of the ball, talking about the Alabama defense. And the front seven's okay. They're good. It's Alabama. It's 4 and 5 star players, and nobody will be surprised if 4 and 5 star players start playing like 4 and 5 star players.
Right.
But what concerns me, well, not necessarily concerns me, but whenever you watch Alabama, what sticks out is, other than Kool-Aid McKinstry, the back part of that defense for what is the baby of Nick Saban, they don't kind of look like they normally do.
Yeah, it's been something that I've been harping on for the past several seasons as well, as that secondary. They're loaded with talent, but they just get, there's no communication, it seems like, in the back side, because look at the Tennessee game last year. We had a safety on one of the best wide receivers, in the SEC several times, and he beat us every single time. So the communication has not been there in the back seven. And it just seems like it hasn't been there as of yet. Now, again, it could start just like that, but there's a lot that's got to change. I will say, on the defensive side in the secondary, Malachi Moore, he's a senior this year. He's played really, really well. Kool-Aid, of course, has played well, but other than that, nobody else has really stepped up yet and started playing up to their potential, I feel like.
So which players do you think Ole Miss fans need to be keeping an eye on, or even Alabama fans? Who do you think could show up and surprise Saturday?
We are really high on Deontay Lawson. He's a inside linebacker at Alabama. He's a sophomore. He played a little bit last year. He came in late in the season, and he's had a really good game, week and a few weeks so far this season. That's a guy to keep an eye on. You want to keep him out of the backfield. He rushes the quarterback pretty good. So you want to keep him out of sorts if you want to have success. And offensively, Isaiah Bond so far has had a really great season at wide receiver. Looks like he's pretty much taken over the number one wide receiver spot. He's really, really fast. So, if he gets loose in the secondary, and with Jalen Milroe throwing the deep ball accurately, if he can, it could spell trouble if you're an Ole Miss fan. So, you want to keep your eyes on those two guys.
Yeah, I think if you're an Ole Miss fan, definitely the matchup of the safety and the explosive play in the passing game for Alabama is probably going to be a major key in this football game. If Ole Miss can keep it from happening, Ole Miss is going to probably win. Yep. If Alabama hits on one or two, Alabama is probably going to win. So, all right, before we do predictions and talk about that, I do want to bring this up. What do you think that Alabama can do? What do you think they will do, Tommy Rees, offensively, to help Jalen Milroe out? Because the offense that somebody referred to it that was pretty good. They said Tommy Rees called Ian Book's offense for Jalen Milroe. Mm-hmm. And that isn't what he does well. Do you think that is going to change a little bit? And do you think that can change?
Honestly, I think it has to happen, Stephen, for Alabama to be successful. They're going to have to play to Jalen Milroe's strengths, and his strength right now is his legs. He can get out of the pocket and make plays with his legs. So I feel like you're going to need to spy him a good bit this weekend to keep him in the pocket. And the way the offensive line has struggled with containing the pocket, if Ole Miss is able to keep him in that pocket, it's going to be a long day for Alabama, I feel like, because I don't think, he's a lot more better player with moving his legs and shifting the pocket to where he wants it to be instead of him just sitting there and trying to scan the field and find an open receiver.
All right, so let's do predictions for Saturday. I gave mine with Luke Robinson earlier this week. I think Ole Miss is going to win the game 27-21. Mm-hmm. What is your predictions?
I'm going to be a homer here because I have to be. I think Alabama's going to win, but I think Ole Miss at the will cover the spread at 7. I think it may be like a last second field goal. I'm going to go 30-27.
30-27.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Thank you for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Thank you so much, Jake, for coming by today, and good luck this weekend. And if you're traveling, be safe, man.
Thank you for having me on, Steve. I really enjoyed it.